Keep watching The Politics every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on New York Parrot TV.
Seduced by Jill Sharon Kimmelman. I had always privately scoffed at the notions that a lover's touch could truly cause fair skin to blush, that a single kiss bestowed.
Undoubtedly, Africa is the best tourism destination on Earth. The continent is blessed with the most conducive atmosphere. To feel and enjoy these blessings, join the most productive one-week tour of the continent organized by Daylight Africa every September 2nd to September 9th to see beyond the fallacies about Africa on the mainstream media. Contact us at daylightafrica@gmail.com or call 718-822-5555. Daylight Africa. Revolutionizing tourism industries in Africa.
Good afternoon. I'm Carlo Parcelli. I see we have a new co-sponsor. Lenny was very happy to see that. So he's always favored sex over war. That was one of Lenny's strong points. Today we have Alex Suarez as our guest. Don't forget to hit subscribe. He's a longtime activist, and he will be appearing at he's a co-organizer for Rage Against Imperialism, the event that takes place just 2 days from now here in Washington, D.C., March the 18th. So without further ado, I'd like Alex to just tell us a little bit about himself and to talk about the rally here and the rally that's also taking place in Florida later this month. Thanks, Alex, for showing up.
Sure, no problem. Just to clarify, the rally that's happening this weekend in D.C. Is a peace rally, and it happens to be the 20th anniversary of the 20th anniversary of the war in Iraq. And Dust James, who's co-organizing the Rage Against Imperialism event, which is a walk and empowerment event in Central Florida, Gainesville, Florida, which will be the first weekend of May to also commemorate May Day, which will be the 6th and 7th of May, Saturday, Sunday camp out outside of Gainesville. That's going to be Rage Against Imperialism. But the event that is this weekend, which Just James originally was going to just go to by himself to represent us, I actually found out earlier today, and this is the first time I'm announcing publicly, that I'm going to be able to go as well. So very exciting for this weekend. There should be several thousand to go. Our event in May is going to be much smaller. It's going to be training and workshops, things of that nature, and empowerment and walk in nature, things like that. But yeah, so those are the two events that are planned that I'm involved with. The DC thing is I'm just going to be another participant, but the one in Florida, I'm going to be hosting or co-organizing with Just James on that. So.
Could you tell us a little bit about who's going to be at the event in a couple of days from now in Washington?
Yeah, among the speakers is Gabriel Shipton, Julian Assange's brother, who I met in 2021. Brave man, like his brother. Also, Noam Chomsky. I met him back in 2011 during the Occupy movement. Other speakers, Medea Benjamin. I can't think of everybody off the top of my head. I mean, I know that Dan. Are you guys familiar with Dan Kovalik?
I'm not.
He went to Donbass recently. He travels a lot. He goes to Nicaragua, Venezuela. He was in Venezuela with me a couple of years ago. He's a law professor out of Pittsburgh. And I don't think he's going to be speaking at the event in D.C., but he will be there, and I plan to reunite with him and introduce him to Dust James. They have been in touch in the past. But yeah, a lot of important thinkers and activists and leftists are going to be at the event this weekend, and we want to talk to people and hand out flyers about our event in May and why we feel it's important to host it in the South and why we feel it's important to be anti-imperialist. To me, there's a difference between being anti-war and anti-imperialist. So we're not saying everybody that comes in May should have this view, but this is what Dust and my view is, that We support the special military operation in Ukraine to a degree. What I mean by to a degree is there could be excesses. Putin's troops could go into Kiev or go into western portions of Ukraine where there's not a Russian population that needs protecting. But in principle, we support in certain circumstances war, especially when you're going after neo-Nazi and fascist forces that have been bombing the Russian population in Donbass for 9 years. So as an anti-imperialist, I can say there are situations where war is necessary. What you had is certain people getting certain criticism. I don't really want to get into it, but saying, okay, you're not really anti-war. But I can say, for me, I'm anti-war in general, but there are certain situations where you're fighting imperialism, where you're fighting fascist forces when it's necessary. So we're not going to necessarily at our event bash war in every situation, but we're going to talk about the importance of anti-imperialism and, oppressed nations and working class people having a voice here in the South. There's plenty of people, independents here in Florida. I'm in Jacksonville. Gainesville's a couple hours away where we're going to have the event. Plenty of people that don't vote or that are independent, that come from a poor or working class background, that are revolutionaries and anti-imperialists that are not given a voice at a lot of these events. And so we want to give them a voice and do workshops and a walk and for them to feel empowered and their voices heard. That's really what the event in May is about.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Ben?
And great to hear you to hear the distinction between being completely pacifist and being against the violence of war, but in certain situations like in self-defense. What I'm wondering is we know how this will be treated in the mainstream media, because the previous rally, I think Rachel Maddow spotted the 2 Russian flags, and it was pro-Russians, it was right-wingers, that's how it's going to be displayed, I'm pretty sure. But I hope you make a big enough crowd.
So I don't understand why she didn't resign after the Mueller report's conclusions. Because the Mueller report, right, it proved Russiagate was false. She built her whole career on Russiagate. At that point, she should have resigned. What I do know is that she lost a lot of listeners. People stopped. The ratings declined in her show because that's all she ever talked about. She's, I know Mueller's going to prove it. I know Mueller's going to prove it. He never proved that there was any collusion. So I don't get why she could still be on the air after losing such credibility. But, that's the corporate press for you.
They just move on to the next lie, the next set of lies. Yeah. So, given that, though, what's your general feeling about the American public and the war in Ukraine?
Absolutely, I think that Americans, just working class, average Americans that I talk to every day, we're fed up. The other day I was at the dentist's office. And we were complaining to each other, in the hallway, how we're being treated as working class people, how long we had to wait to see the damn dentist. And then I mentioned to a lady who seemed to be, intelligent. I was like, well, the government's sending all our money to Ukraine to start World War III instead of taking care of us here at home so we can have better programs for better dental. She's like, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I don't know if that woman was a Republican or independent or what, but you just talk to average people and they understand. They're not being told this by the CNN if they watch CNN, right? Because Nielsen ratings show that the average age of CNN viewer is 65, something like that. Young people aren't watching this crap anymore. But, you talk to everyday Americans and they don't need to be told by the media. They see the derailments and they're intelligent enough to know that there's a correlation between all these trail derailments. We just saw the other day in Manatee County here in Florida, south of Tampa, another derailment. And so they understood that the strike, even though the media wanted to make the narrative only about sick days, paid sick days, when the strike was going on with Amtrak, they were demanding better safety precautions. I mean, if the government had adhered to those demands, the derailment in East Palestine probably would have never happened. But the media, when I say media, I mean the corporate media, so-called mainstream. I call them lamestream. They're not covering this, but everyday Americans understand this. And look, our trains are way behind. The government is selling us out, Democrats and Republicans, and we're sending all these billions of dollars that could end homelessness, that could end poverty here at home to Ukraine. For what? We don't know where that money's going. It's going to extremist groups. It's probably being washed, and some of the weapons we sent probably has already been sent to the Middle East. And it's going to these extremist groups that run the government in Kiev to continue to attack the people of Donbass, who are a minority, an oppressed minority of ethnic Russians in the country that need to be defended. I don't know how you can say that you want to defend oppressed people and minority rights and not understand that the people of Donbass, with their militias, defended themselves for 8 years, but they had enough. Somebody had to step in.
Well, just briefly, I used to work for Amtrak back in the day, and one thing we were told we learned firsthand was that the private freight haulers and Amtrak had contracts to split the maintenance of the track and other, the signals and all, and that the private freight haulers never put a penny into the fund. It was all Amtrak fund, and that's why Amtrak was so poor. And I worked in the consumer complaint department, and people were literally dying on the trains at that time because when the cars stopped, the air conditioning didn't work. And so I didn't last too long at the job because I would tell the people the truth, and then I'd get called before my boss, and I got a warning and a warning and a warning. So I figured I wasn't long for that, but it's been going on for decades. And you compare it to high-speed rail in other countries, no comparison. No,
I mean, think of it. In Europe, I lived a couple years in Europe. In Europe, they have magnetic trains that don't touch the ground. They go super fast. And in China, you have the fastest train in the world, goes faster than a plane. And a lot of people said, "Oh yeah, that's just Shanghai to Beijing, right?" No, now they have trains that go deep into the countryside of the nation. They're way ahead of us on infrastructure. The empire is in decay. The empire is bankrupting itself, and we need to realize these truths.
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump in with, I mean, this is Marxism. Marxism explains this. It explains that the interests of the capitalist class, the ownership class, are different than the interests of the working class, and there's always going to be money available to fund the interests of the capitalists, of the ownership class. So war, empire, they're gonna fund that. You want healthcare, you want trains. That's not going to benefit the ruling class. They're not going to spend their money, which is our money, to further interests that aren't going to benefit themselves. That's bad investment on their behalf. So I mean that's my basic outlook on why things are as they are. Why is there always money for war and there's never money for healthcare or transportation? And yeah, so
those are partisan issues, don't you know? Those are party issues. When the two parties unite, when they are a mono party, is exactly about foreign policy, about war, about taxing the rich. There's no distinction between Democrats and Republicans on the most basic questions, facing regular Americans.
Well, there's two capitalist parties. They're both funded by the same billionaires, for the most part.
Two cheeks in the same arse, as George Galloway loves to say.
Now, so what do we do when we have people that are using their voice, their considerable platform, to speak truth and to say the right things, even if it's for the wrong motives? You know what I'm talking about, Carlo? Like, what do we?
Yeah.
How do we deal with that? Like, to me, I got to applaud it. So when Trump says we don't need regime change in Russia, we should stop spending money for regime change in Russia. We should work on regime change here. Now, of course, Trump means put him in power and regime change, Biden. But I think that's useful. I think it's good when Trump rallies the population around an anti-war, anti-regime change in Russia sentiment, even if he's just trying to do it, for his own political benefit. Like, you got to kind of applaud him and say, thank you for making that statement and getting the people that listen to you, the foolish people that listen to you, getting them to be against this ridiculous waste of resources in Russia and Ukraine.
I want to hear what Alex has to think about this, but I'll
Yes,
introduce it. I'll introduce it with a joke, more or less, that my wife told me this morning. She said some politician, I can't remember which one, accused Trump. It might have been Blinken. Actually, it might have been Blinken. Accused Trump of possibly sabotaging the war in Ukraine. So he's using a war term to talk about somebody who's basically discussing peace. That's how twisted these people are. Alex, what are your views?
So I can get into what's her name, Major Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
So on Twitter, you know, a lot of people are sectarian, right?
Yeah.
So I made a statement on Twitter, and I got all these attacks. I was just saying a basic truth, and I started out by saying what a terrible person she is, by the way. But then you can't even say something true about somebody who happens to be Republican without going on the attack. Oh, you're a white supremacist supporter. Look at my skin color. You know what I mean? I'm indigenous. I'm Latino. Like, give me a break. But like, you know, I wanted to also get into something about the student debt. But I'll answer your question first. So all I said is she's a terrible person. She's a bigot. She made claims that all Black and Latinos in the United States are drug dealers the other day. And I even made like a response when she said that the other day, like, you know, saying, well, she must have been rejected by us. That's why she has those opinions. But at the same time, it says, so she's terrible. She's a bigot. She's terrible. But she's been right lately. She has been right lately. She voted. She was one of the few to vote for an audit of all that money that went to the neo-Nazis and the extremist groups in Ukraine. And recently, she was one of the few votes to not sanction Syrians who just suffered an earthquake. The entire squad voted to the right of her. I'm sorry, it's just a fact. But you can't say that. Even if you're a minority, even if you're attacking her in the same tweet, just saying how she voted, oh no, you're this, you're that. I mean, it's just sectarian.
Yeah, it's so poisoned, especially on Twitter, but also in real life. You have to be, you're that Republican MAGA guy, or you're that leftist, which is exactly the same as AOC, for example.
That's how they police opinions. I mean, that's the whole point, is to censor and police opinions that are not, you know, in the interest of the ruling establishment. But no, so that's what you gotta do. It's obligatory. Yeah. It's obligatory. You denounce them. You say, now I know they're Hitler, but what they said here is actually valid, and it's good that it's being said with their platform, because
her motivations were different than yours and I's, right? Because we're leftists. But she did do the right thing. You can't even point out she did the right thing for whatever reason. Oh, no, you can't say a fact. That means you're a supporter.
The key is motivation. I have a slightly different take on it. I'll go back to Trump. For example, Trump, he's coming out more or less in the same context toward Ukraine that Marjorie Taylor Greene is. He's against the war. But I remember when he was in the administration, when Bolton mentioned something that Trump didn't know, for example, there was oil in Venezuela, he blurted out, we have to invade Venezuela. So that would imply war. When he learned that we were getting Syrian oil and wheat out of Syria now, he said, good, it's ours. It belongs to us. And that's in the context of destabilizing Syria, which is another euphemism for war. So the problem is that these guys are disingenuous. And I came up with Lyndon Johnson, who promised that there would be absolutely no hike in the war in Vietnam. It wouldn't happen. And then by the time I turned 18, there was 500,000 American troops in Vietnam, and I was 1A and fighting my draft board every fucking goddamn day, even though I was married with a child. And so I'm very keen on these lying cocksuckers that are in. And listen, I have permission to use the word cocksucker from a very dear gay friend of mine. He said, you use it vehemently as you want to use it.
He gave you the pass.
He gave me the pass. I'm very sensitive to that, because it took me 6 years of fighting my draft board to make sure to get out of going to Vietnam, and a lot of it was, let me just say one thing. I was in my high school class, and the teacher wanted to know who we would vote for, Goldwater or Johnson. I guess I was 16 then. And I said, well, I'm not going to vote for either one, but I think Goldwater will win because he's threatening to nuke Vietnam, but he can't do that without congressional authority. And you can look at the Congress and it's not going to go that way. But of course he didn't win. And but everybody else in the room, I think with the exception of one other kid, was behind Johnson. And then 2 years later, those guys are fucking crawling around in the Mekong Delta. Fuck you. You can't be that kind of, you can't be that simple-minded with these fuckers.
You're not
They're
talking
all
about
in it for
1960.
themselves.
Are you talking about
They're in it for themselves.
1968 when there was contenders against Johnson, or you're talking about before that?
I'm sorry. I was talking about the Goldwater Johnson election of 64.
64. Okay, just to get the chronology.
Yeah, and then in 68, Johnson stepped down, and Humphrey went on to lose to Nixon. So, and then you got another set of liars in there. So,
are you aware, Carlo, that the area of Syria that's now occupied by the United States to extract the wheat and oil that you mentioned earlier is actually larger than the Donbass, than the areas that's under Russian control right now?
I didn't realize that. In fact, I just looked at it on a map. It's up near the Kurds, who are another story altogether. So I'm not surprised, but no, I didn't know it was geographically larger.
And the irony is, the liberator of the Arabs during the Crusades, Saladin, he was a Kurd himself.
Was he?
Yeah, he was a Kurd, and his physician was a Sephardic Jew. He trusted his life to a Jew. I mean, this is before what's considered modern day Israel and all that. But there's a lot of ironies in history.
Yeah, there is.
I'm the one guy that's not in America, but you piqued my interest because Barry Goldwater, was it? I think Hillary Clinton and his husband came out of that camp. She was a Goldwater girl.
Yeah, she said that.
Yep, I remember that. And look at them. They're the ones who bombed Yugoslavia to ashes. It's just the same.
Biden was a segregationist. So was Hillary and Goldwater. I'm not a big Bernie guy, but you have to say the truth. I mean, Bernie was being arrested at that time. He was taking part in the civil rights struggle. Biden lies on the record against his own staff's advice, saying, "Oh, I marched with that guy. I marched with this guy." You were in favor of segregation back then. You were talking about a racial jungle that we can't desegregate our schools. Obama picked Biden because he wanted to use him to work with the Republicans, because he knew he really was a right-wing Republican at heart. But that didn't work either. They still tried to sabotage Obama. Not a big Obama guy either, but it's what happened. But I wanted to get to student debt, if that's okay.
Yeah,
because I think it's by design, right? So just as the ruling class or the elites screw over working people, they also screw over students. And Chomsky's gotten into this. Student debt is by design. The best way to pacify the youth, who are always the ones that are the vanguard or the cadre of the revolution, is to get them worried about paying back a debt. Therefore, the student loans are higher interest than auto loans, than loans for getting a car in this country. And that is by design. It is very intentional. And also, why do we not have a federal jobs guarantee like in Europe, which is a little more socialist system? I'm not going to say it's pure socialism, EU. By any means, they're under U.S. sphere, right? And foreign policy, all that. But the reason why we don't have a federal jobs guarantee is because that's also going to encourage you to rebel. It's not that the French, for example, who have a very strong federal program, it's not that the French are naturally more rebellious than Americans. They don't have to worry about retaliation, because if they get fired for attending a protest over pension change or whatever, they don't have to worry. They have an equivalent job guaranteed to them by the state, a few days later. So here in the United States, Americans want to rebel, but they're afraid about losing their jobs. They don't have the workers' rights they need. And the youth are worried about paying back debts. They're not going to go out and protest. So all of that, I believe, is by design.
I want to bring into focus, what was the 60s? So 40 years ago, the gold-backed dollar was destroyed, mostly by the Vietnam War and the Great Society, lots of expenses. And now we just had a banking collapse of 3 banks, and Credit Suisse is on the chopping block. And the interesting thing is, these are, Silicon Valley Bank. These are big tech startups, mostly corporations. They get immediate bailouts. They're forgiven. Not you, the students, not you, the people. You never get a single bailout. You just keep paying, which is the American way of life, it seems to me. But yeah,
they want socialism for the rich. They'll bail out the rich, no problem. They just don't want it for everybody else.
The risks are socialized. The winnings are private.
I totally agree with Alex on the student debt. It's a new methodology. My wife, we're about the same age, we remember in the 60s that hey, let's talk about it like this. We were woke. We got woke big time by the Vietnam War, because who the fuck wanted to do that? except idiots, to go to Vietnam. It's stupid. It's like Muhammad Ali said. Those people never did anything to me. Here I am in my country. They're trying to kill me every fucking day. I get death threats every day. So anyway, after we had a younger generation, among them my wife's younger brother, and when they went to high school, and they got heavily into drugs, and drugs were used the same way, I think, for a number of decades as student debt is used now, and that is to pacify people, to make them not not read the stuff that we were reading, not making the change that we were making in our own consciousness, and now I think they've come up with a better method, which is just simply student debt. I mean, but what it needed was for college tuitions to get so high that debt meant debt slavery. Because I remember I worked in a grocery store, a Grand Union grocery store down here in D.C. or in Maryland, outside of D.C., and paid my entire tuition. My tuition at the state school was $175 a semester for five three credit courses. So that those days are long gone. When they discovered they could charge these outrageous amounts for the same thing, for the same product.
And then, like you said, they privatized the lending. So the student lenders are all private, but they're federally guaranteed. So if somebody reneges on their loan, the taxpayers just pick up the money, and it's just a win-win for the private lenders.
Ever notice that gas prices are lower in richer neighborhoods and more expensive in low-income neighborhoods? Everything by design is to keep you down if you're a lower class.
For sure, it's the establishments is interested. They have oppositional interests. I mean, they don't have any interest. They're interested in confusing us, disenfranchising us. And I'm losing my train of thought, Carlo. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that not down here in D.C. That's not my experience. My wife and I were driving down Nebraska Avenue and Main 11.
Oh, with gas prices,
and the price was over $5, and down here at the local Shell station it's $3.65. So it's actually less in my neighborhood, which is a working class neighborhood, than it is in that's essentially Northwest Washington. That's one of the highest income areas in the city.
That might be anecdotal. I don't know what the big number, the macro numbers are, but
around the country it could be completely different.
Yeah.
Here in Florida, I see it all the time. Every time I pass through the more low-income areas, I see the gas prices are significantly higher.
Huh. Yeah. Well, I think it's probably a good time to take that break. We'll come back after the break.
Well, if our producer's here,
if MUTIU's there. Apparently not. We'll keep going.
Maybe we'll get another interesting commercial. That lead up one was pretty interesting. A little racy.
Yeah, well, we'll get more viewers if we have.
Yeah. So, are you guys familiar at all with DeSantis' foreign policy positions? I heard they're pretty bad.
Yeah, I heard he's basically he's just pro war. Maybe he says end the war against Russia and start the war against China, but I still think he wants to prosecute the war against Russia too. But in lieu of us going to break, you can start on that, but the producer might cut you off to go to break. But are you familiar with his foreign policy? You want to share it with us?
I want to talk more about his domestic policy because I live here in Florida. I've confronted DeSantis face to face before. He's actually was born in this town in Jacksonville. A lot of people that are anti-imperialists, they say, his foreign policy is worse than Trump. He's terrible, but his domestic policy is okay, right? So they say that. They say it's okay. And I don't want to get into the vaccine issue. I won't even get into that. But there are other parts of his domestic policy that I think leftists should all oppose that are largely ignored. People don't know what's going on down here. They don't realize the legislation that he's passing successfully down here. He's a very effective evil. He's much more effective than Trump could ever be. And it's very scary that he wants to be president. But for example, I'm currently looking for work. I'm working class, but I would never sell out. I would never sell my principles. I know for a fact tomorrow I could get a job full time as a substitute teacher very easily. And why is that? Because thousands and thousands and thousands of public school teachers in this state have quit. And as many of them have left the state to look for work in Georgia or in other neighboring states, in Alabama, et cetera. And why is this? Because of the extreme policies that he successfully passed here in Florida. Not only don't say gay, they want to make it a gay issue. It's way beyond that. It's civil rights. You can't teach history. You can't teach the Holocaust. You can't teach Anne Frank's diary anymore. Yeah, that's a fact.
Wow.
And so like you can't even touch the Civil War. You can't even touch the race issue. It's way beyond critical race theory. You can't even touch the Civil War in public school classes anymore. Thousands of history teachers have quit over this. And this is how extreme it is. Nor in Georgia, nor in any other Republican red state in the South has a governor been as extreme as DeSantis and as successful as DeSantis of getting all these things passed. And it's just insanity. I mean, of course, one of the first things he did was the run over protester bill. He wanted to do Charlottesville on steroids. He wanted to make it legal to run us over. Wow. So just bill after bill after bill after bill. And by the way, they say he's anti-Disney. I can show you the pictures. He was married at Disney World in Orlando. He has his naval uniform on. He looks very happy. But yeah, so for him being anti-Disney, he was married there. He spent his money there to get married. He wasn't educated in Florida. He's an elite. He went to Yale in Connecticut. So I don't know why there's an appeal with certain, I don't want to stereotype, certain working class people in Florida, DeSantis. He doesn't give a damn about you. He's using identity politics, right? Both the Democrats and the Republicans use identity politics. He's using identity politics to divide. He's doing it very successfully, passing all these extreme laws. And the reason why is because in 2020, I was tear gassed in Jacksonville with Black Lives Matter. Many of us were repressed by the police. He saw all these young 19, 20-year-old white kids getting arrested alongside their black and brown brothers and sisters. And he freaked out. He said, we need to do something about this. We have to prevent the future generations knowing about the black struggle. And that's when they started passing all these crazy laws. That was the motivation behind it. Because me as an independent journalist and as an analyzer, I always try to get to the root cause of things, think critically. It's like, okay, what's the motivation behind this, behind that? That's where's the primary motivation. The urgency in getting these things passed is because he doesn't want future white kids to join future protests like that for a revolution.
Yeah, it's a repeat of what happened in the 60s. And didn't he outlaw the words, not outlaw, but the word slavery is has been modified to tourism or something. I'll
tell you something else. These laws are very broad, right? So they say, that's just to protect kids, the gay issue. The law says, or any age deemed inappropriate, literally. So that means in any college that receives state's funds from Florida, they can use that law to say, okay, we can't touch on homosexuality at all. And also, teen suicides have gone up already. Just since this law was passed a couple of years ago, teens are a very vulnerable part of our society. Many of them are struggling with their identity. They may be gay. They may need to talk to a school counselor about it. They're working class. They go to a public school. Those kids are now dying more because of those laws. So people don't realize the implications of all of this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
You reminded me what I was trying to say earlier when you said divided, because definitely placated, disenfranchised, divided, and confused. That's in the interest of the working class to inculcate those things amongst the working class. So we're going to take our break now. It looks like MUTIU's here. So we'll be right back and continue our discussion.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Undoubtedly, Africa is the best tourism destination on Earth. The continent is blessed with the most conducive atmosphere. To feel and enjoy these blessings, join the most productive one-week tour of the continent organized by Daylight Africa every September 2nd to September 9th to see beyond the fallacies about Africa on the mainstream media. Contact us at daylightafrica@gmail.com or call 718-822-5555. Daylight Africa. Revolutionizing tourism industries in Africa.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easy?
And we're back.
And we are.
We're back with Alex Suarez discussing the domestic and foreign policy. We were on talking about the Ron DeSantis, and Alex is from Florida, so he has the inside scoop on a lot of the policies of DeSantis and how harmful they'd be. And I have to agree with Ron Placone, the comic commentator. DeSantis is bad news. What do you think, Alex?
Well, yeah, he's also trying to pass a law currently, and with his success rate, he'll probably get it done, where if you have a blog that's critical of his government, you have to register with the Tallahassee government so they can easily more surveil you. I mean, this is what he's doing every day.
So I've got a question. I mean, it seems pretty obvious. The establishment is trying to promote DeSantis. They're trying to make him seem like Trump, but of course, they're trying to make him appeal to Trump's base. So they want to steal votes from Trump. So in the Republican primary, we're going to have that's going to be, it's going to be Trump, and then all the establishment is going to rally around DeSantis. So do you guys think that DeSantis can pull the wool over the eyes of, true Trump supporters? I'm thinking DeSantis is going to fail in the primary, just like what happened in the previous primary of 2016, where just Trump ran the field. It's going to be interesting to watch those debates and to see DeSantis try and take Trump's base, but I don't see it happening. But clearly they like DeSantis, and he's their Trojan horse. He's the Trojan horse of the establishment, and he's like the anti-Trump. But
you ever notice he copies his mannerisms?
I mean, I didn't notice that. I know a lot of the arguments, a lot of the pandering to these biases. DeSantis engages in the same kind of pandering, but the mannerisms I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, DeSantis is watching videos every day of Trump and how he moves and trying to copy him in that way.
Has he given any nicknames yet, or is that still a Trumpism?
Well, there's certain people that call him Death Santis, right? Like I said, I won't necessarily get into the vaccine issue, but I'll tell you this: when COVID first started, they asked him why is Florida the number one out of 50 states in deaths, and he said, "Oh, it's because of Latinos. It's because of those Hispanic workers that are coming in and bringing it here." And I confronted him on that soon after when he came to town. But, this is what we're dealing with. And actually, I'm not a Trump supporter by any means, but Trump has changed his rhetoric this time. If you notice, when he gave his speech announcing his candidacy, he said, "I want to work with Hispanics and better your economy." You didn't see the same type of rhetoric as last time. But DeSantis is keeping up, this anti-Hispanic racism. And I don't think it's going to get him very far.
So you basically agree with what Billy Bob's saying.
I hope you're right.
So Alex.
Well, I think that, yes, the establishment is more behind DeSantis or Biden. Mm-hmm. That's who they're banking on. I think that Trump in the end will defend the interests of the elite, but certainly he would have a better foreign policy than DeSantis. But we also have to remember when Trump was in power, he sent these lethal missiles that he was pressured to send to Ukraine. He ended up, adhering to that. And then also when he had opportunity to pardon other people besides his cronies that he pardoned, good people like Snowden, Assange, he didn't do that. So when push comes to shove, we've seen that he did not do the right thing. He might be different this time around if he becomes president. Who knows? Certainly when it comes to rhetoric and foreign policy, his position of wanting peace in Ukraine is better. Although not every person that says that they want peace in Ukraine means the same thing that what you and I think, right? When we say peace in Ukraine, we mean get to the diplomatic table. When they say peace in Ukraine, they mean defeat Russia. They mean keep sending weapons. So we have to be strict about what we mean by actual peace here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I'm even in favor of peace there right now. I think Russia's going to have to go all the way.
Yeah.
It'll help
But
with a diplomatic solution if they go all the way. I'm not saying that they destroy Kiev, but you're right. They need to continue to advance.
yeah,
Yeah.
and my nickname that I can't get the Trump movement to accept is the stank ass. So, but that's just me.
Was that your nickname for DeSantis?
Yeah, the stank ass. Yeah, Ron the stank ass. So you heard it first right here on Foreign Policy Review. We have all the quality commentary.
Take the battle to the skank ass.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Kiss
Wow.
the stank ass.
What
Yeah,
I'm wondering
anyway.
about, whichever way it goes with DeSantis, I mean, the favored by the establishment, or Trump, the renegade, what is going to happen with China, which he got memed for because Trump was all about that China.
DeSantis is such a coward, too. When I confronted him, I should have called him that nickname. He was running into his motorcade. I was with a small group of people. And I said, "You're racist against Latinos." I started yelling at him, and he's running from me. Like, I don't have a weapon on me. Like, but we blocked his motorcade for a while, and then 2 days later, he had a press conference in Tallahassee to run over protesters' bill. I mean, it had nothing to do with us, the timing, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah. Well, they can't speak extemporaneously. They need a script. But yeah, China. Let's hear about China. What do you think?
They're more advanced than us, right? On infrastructure.
Oh, absolutely.
On diplomacy, right? They help the Iranians and the Saudis like the United States could never do. This is why Trump assassinated Soleimani, by the way. He went to Iraq on a peace mission to unite with the Saudis, and so they were finally able to do it. They hosted the Saudis and the Iranians, and this is going to help end the war in Yemen. I think this is a good thing.
I think that was the spark that led Saudi Arabia and Iran to get together under China's umbrella. That was it. Suleiman was it.
And implications on the Turkey-Syria relationship, because don't forget, Bashar al-Assad is in Moscow as we speak. So he's re-entering the Arab world. I mean, we could have peace in the Middle East in our time, thanks largely to China. I think that's a game changer. I think that's huge. And therefore, I don't know which American party is against war with China at this point. Is there anyone left?
No. They're
third parties.
Yeah,
some of them will show this weekend.
They're getting those fat envelopes from the military-industrial complex. You know.
By the way, I cannot stand Williamson. I can't stand her. No, she's a Zionist. That's number one, right? She's a Zionist. We know that. And number two, you can't work within a counter-revolutionary party. You can't. And I mean both Democrats and Republicans. You know what she's going to end up doing, right? She's going to end up doing what Bernie did. She's going to endorse Biden. We know this. They rig the primaries every time.
And I also want to mention
who's this?
Billy. I want to mention something.
Marianne Williamson is running against Biden.
Crystal Lady,
the Democratic Party. Yeah.
Billy Bob had he also did a recent show yesterday, as a matter of fact, with Godfrey. What's his first
Godfrey
name?
Roberts.
Right.
China expert. Godfrey Roberts.
A very illuminating show.
Yeah. We got into the Iran Saudi Arabia thing. But yeah, I mean, there's war with China just isn't, there's no option for that. There's no good option. I mean, it's, I like his confidence. Like Godfrey Robert is he's optimistic and he's totally confident. And I share his confidence and I share his optimism, but it was great to hear him, articulate it. But I mean, it's inevitable. There's nothing that the West can do to contain China. They can't do it militarily. They can't do it economically. Like it's done. It's over. It was over probably 10 years ago. So we're just watching to see how it actually plays out. And that's what people don't understand. What is the West going to do to keep it from happening? That's what we don't know. How crazy are they going to get? How much pain are they going to inflict on themselves and the Western people to in this useless attempt to maintain their hegemony? We'll find out, but they're not going to be able to.
Taiwan may be the new Ukraine, and if China's forced to invade Taiwan, the United States is going to abandon Taiwan like they abandoned Ukraine.
So it looks like that's the strategy. It looks like that's the strategy. They're going to be provoking China on Taiwan, and right now I hear there's legislation being passed that's going to allow them to steal assets from not just Chinese nationals, but our actual Chinese American citizens, there's legislation that says if China attacks Taiwan, we can then steal all these assets that are held in the West. Trillions in assets are held in the West. And there's this legislation being passed right now saying if China attacks Taiwan. So all they're going to do is just do some egregious things in Taiwan, force China's response, and then they're going to steal all the money. And then we're off to World War III. And that's, it's going to be bad for the West because China's going to fare a little bit better than people are expecting.
But nuclear war means the entire world ends, though, eventually.
Yeah, there is no limit.
Nobody will win in the end if it gets to that. Yeah.
But Alex, let me ask you, what do you think? Do you think that some kind of conflict with China that involves American troops, do you think that will turn the tide of and activate the anti-war movement in this country? I mean, and the general public?
I think if people see China invade Taiwan and the United States act in a similar way it did with Ukraine, I think even the most, I don't want to say the most dumbest, but even like the section of society that were like almost completely brainwashed by the establishment, even them will start to question things if it gets to that. And so there'll be a lot more people that will be willing to support an anti-imperialist or anti-war movement.
It's intriguing to me that putting the proxy war element into the equation stumps people, and they can't make the connection.
When their family isn't being threatened with death on the battlefield, they don't really care. But it's a whole new paradigm when it's U.S. troops getting shot at and killed.
Or they do mea culpa, maxima culpa for the Ukrainians, for Nazis, for out and out Nazis. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension. So anyway,
the U.S. might look to an ally of China to invade because they're not going to invade China itself because China is a nuclear power.
Well,
there might be some retaliatory action in that regard if China invades Taiwan.
They're arming Australia. They're sending nuclear subs to Australia. They're
Japan, South Korea.
Well, Japan, yeah. But Japan has so much trade with China.
What's the name of the president of Australia? I forget his name.
I don't know.
But regardless, he used to support Assange when he was running.
Right.
Now that he has power, he's silent on it. And so I think he has power right now. If the United States wants Australia to go along with their push to provoke Russia, he could say, okay, give me back Assange. But he's such a coward that he won't use Assange as a bargaining chip, apparently.
Yeah, well, that means he's locked into accepting all the military hardware and probably anything they want him to do with it.
And he's not charismatic. If he was charismatic, we'd all know his name. Right? Yeah. He's not a charismatic type of president from what I've seen so far.
No, the United States has basically controlled Australia since they toppled the government of Gough Whitlam over the Pine Gap. That
was in the 70s, right? 1970s?
Yeah. It's been decades. Yeah, they locked it down after that.
Hostages like the Olaf Scholz of the South, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, the Germans, my God. I mean, what did Scholz do when he went to D.C. after the United States got caught blowing up his pipeline? Thank them?
We don't know.
Is he like a slave of the U.S. now? Like, I don't, what more needs to be done here? Like,
yeah, so pathetic.
Yeah, so.
I don't know how the German people tolerate that. I think they've been so browbeaten with propaganda, with anti-Russian propaganda, that right now, they're just totally confused and disenfranchised too. I mean, like we are in a way. But yeah, I mean, where's their self-respect? Like, that was an active war against them, against their quality of life, against their living standards. And like, what matters? What matters to you? Oh no, yeah, they want to just sacrifice their own lives to get Russia. That's the power of propaganda. That's the
power of German journalist, a woman, I forget her name. She was very brave. She went to Donbass. She reported the truth. And they went after her bank account. They went after her family's bank account.
Yes.
And now her and her family, I believe, they're in exile in Crimea. But this is Nazi measures. Like the German government, just for reporting the truth, going after one of their own.
Yep. Frozen his dad's account as well. Yeah. And
her father, her mother, they all had to go into exile.
Yeah. And just to add that Europe as a bloc, which as far as I know is not a military bloc, is now wanting increased naval involvement in the South China Sea, obviously at the behest of the US. The EU's largest trading partner in the world is China. So that would be a death sentence, but the EU is marching along with it. It's so sad.
Then they would have learned them having to send their children with quilts and blankets to school because they won't let them buy Russian oil. But no, they're going to go along with China as well. I mean, this is slavery. They're just the vassal states of the U.S. Whatever the U.S. empire says, they do now. The people need to rise up because the elites that are running their countries are running them into the ground.
And in some parts they are, by the way. In France, massive protests. Georgia, there was an anti-EU protest after the foreign sponsored one. So there's a lot of...
The foreign sponsored one got all the attention from the Western press, though, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Ritter was quite impassioned about Georgia because his wife.
He wrote a long, beautiful piece.
Yeah,
there's somebody I'd like to meet, Scott Ritter. That guy, he's a legend. I mean, everything he did to expose the WMDs no longer being in Iraq. I always say no longer because they were in Iraq, but who gave them to Saddam to fight the Iranians? The U.S. The U.S. turned a blind eye how he used them afterwards as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you invite him to? Because I know if Medea Benjamin is there was an issue between them at the last rally. Is there?
I don't know if Scott's going to be in D.C. this weekend. I'd love to meet him, though.
Yeah.
I know that Scott's friends with Dan Kovalik. Dan Kovalik's going to be in D.C.
Scott needs to be invited because, I mean, he's he needs to be a part of it. Like, people should not be excluding Scott. And I'm not – I know the last rally did, and that's to the detriment of the movement and to the detriment of that particular rally. Like, he needs to be included. He
spoke at the CPI event, and I'm not a fan of CPI nor is Dust, but he did speak at like an after event, and he did go to it. He just didn't speak at the actual rally.
Yeah, Pepe Escobar has been talking about these 20,000 Polish troops that are in Ukraine, and that there was a tank group, the people that operate the tank that was captured by the Russians in Ukraine. Anybody got any feedback on that? Or so
who was captured? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
There was a Polish.
Polish, yeah.
Tank.
I can comment on that.
Group.
So this is the irony of the Poles, right? So Bandera, who's the national hero to these fascist groups, he didn't only massacre Russians and Jews in his territory. He massacred tens of thousands of Poles.
Right.
And the Polish government is taking in these fascist groups and beating up their own citizens. I saw footage of a group of Ukrainians beating up a poor Polish man. And this is what a sellout they are against their history, against their interests. They're taking in the Ukrainian regime, and now they sent a tank, you said, right? They captured a tank. That's crazy.
I know it. The psychology of that is.
I mean, the Poles have their own interests, and right now they're overlapping with Ukrainians' interests, but only to the point that they want Ukraine to cease to exist so they can expand their borders into Galicia. I mean, that's what the Poles want. They want Ukraine to collapse, and they'll take part of Ukraine. But they're virulently anti-Russian, just like the Ukrainian nationalists are.
And you mean the Polish government, which is a right-wing government. You don't mean the Polish people. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of the Polish people feel Slavic, like they're Russian.
The reality, unfortunately, though, is that generations of anti-communist, anti-Russian propaganda has had an effect on a segment of the Polish population. And so, just like in Ukraine, you have a segment of ultra-nationalists, and the same is true in Poland. But it's by and large, it's the government. And there are a lot of good, Polish people that love Russia and that are on the right side of the issue. Yeah. But there's the opposite kind of people as well.
They don't want to have their bank accounts frozen either, like Germany did. Right, so these people are intimidated as well.
Well, and also this notion of not inviting the Russians to the ceremony at Auschwitz is disgusting. Right.
I didn't know that. Most of the concentration camps were liberated. I'm part Russian Jew myself. Most of the camps were liberated by the Soviets. To not invite them, I'm very upset. I didn't know that happened.
By the Red Army, yeah. Do you know who was there? Germany was there, the one who built the camps. The Ukraine was there for some reason, and the Poles were there.
So you have the collaborator nation and the Germans, they're okay, but not the Russians who freed most of the camps?
Yes.
That's insane. Carlo, I want you to DM me the story on that. I'm gonna retweet that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll find something.
It's this whole approach, it's from the Western imperialists want to invert history. They want to make history the opposite of what it actually was. And they use their soft power apparatus to do that. and it's effective, and it confuses a lot of people. You know, Hitler and Stalin were the same, and you know, the Poles were the victims, and the Jews were the victims of both of these aggressors. It's like that's the nonsense.
Revisionist history. I have my issues with Stalin, but to compare him to Hitler is outrageous.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I know it's I hate. I'm going to do this, but it's like the jokes about the Poles. How many Poles it take to screw in a light bulb? It applies to all of Europe, and much of the United States. Let's just say all of the United States too. The United States doesn't know how to screw in a light bulb unless there's 4 people fucking it up.
Archbishop Romero, before he was assassinated by U.S. agents in El Salvador, wrote to John Paul II, the Polish Pope, pleading with him to intervene, do something. He abandoned his own archbishop and let him be assassinated by thugs.
Yeah,
that's what the Polish Pope was.
People, yeah, that's funny because I was working closely with groups down there, and that was quite a terrible thing.
Dan was in Central America at that time as well. I don't know if he went to El Salvador, but he went to Nicaragua. Yeah.
Who's that?
Dan Kovalik. Yeah, he was involved in Central America in the 80s.
Yeah. We worked with CISPAS, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. So we did footage up here of demonstrations and what they called emergency gathering. Well, they had some word for it. So whenever students or nuns or priests were killed, we got out of the Salvadorian embassy and tape it, send the raw tape down to El Salvador so that the FMLN could see that they had support from people here in the United States. So,
Alex,
by the way, I was one of the Venezuelan embassy protectors in 2019 in DC.
Oh,
that's part of the reason why I was invited to Venezuela 2 years later. But yeah, I mean, just the lawlessness of the U.S. kidnapping diplomats, like Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab.
Yes,
torturing him and torturing Assange and real journalists. This is the lawlessness of the United States. No respect for international law. No respect for embassies. Trying to install a puppet regime like Guaido, who was voted out by the opposition recently. They can't say he's the president of Venezuela anymore. So they continue to hold Alex Saab on false charges in Miami. And I wrote a book about the Saab case, just in case. But Saab, they're holding him there. And who's the president of Venezuela? That's the reason they're giving. Oh, we can't say he's a real diplomat because we don't recognize Maduro. If it's not Guaido, then it's because it's an invisible Venezuelan president. Like, this is the absurdity of cases like that.
Really?
It's the rules-based order, Alex. You don't like rules? So Alex, I was about to say we appreciate your activism and your what is that called when you get everybody together for this rally? Organize your activism and your organizing. We really appreciate it. You're doing a great service. We hope this rally is a great success. We hope thousands and thousands of people show up. And just thank you for organizing it and telling us about it today. I know we're getting close. We got about a minute and a half before our hard stop.
Well, I was interesting because it just reminded me of Elliot Abrams and he was the one that came up with the Guaido thing. It's the way that the twisted minds in Washington. I had a little run-in with Elliot Abrams. I'll tell you guys about it sometime.
These are the same twisted minds that are saying, oh, no, we know who did it. We know who blew up the pipeline. We know who did it.
Yeah,
it was a pro-Ukrainian group. We can't tell you who, but we know, who's going to believe that crap?
Six guys on a yacht.
Is real too, right?
I know that the woman on that boat was Victoria Nuland.
You know those bombs were disguised to look like plants, right? Underwater plants,
right? Yeah.
Well, did it from a yacht, from a little yacht, and they brought all these bombs, and yeah.
Oh God!
If I can get it in a minute, just to end a final note of hope. You've all heard about the MQ-9 Reaper drone that Russia downed. It didn't attack it. What was obvious to me after it is both militaries went out of their way to say it was an accident to avoid actual confrontation.
Oh, over the Black Sea, yeah.
Yeah, over the Black Sea. But they all went out of their way saying, well, it wasn't shot down. We didn't get into, we don't want to, except for people like Lindsey Graham.
Might as well have been a balloon, right? Chinese balloon? Really?
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point, Ben. So officially everybody was quick to say, oh, no, it was not aggressive. But then it's these clowns like Lindsey Graham and
who want to shoot down jets now. Yeah.
Those disgusting chicken hawks.
All right, that seems to wrap it up for us. Good show, and thank you very much, Alex, for appearing.
Feel free to look me up on Twitter, comrades, so I'll tell you more about our event in May and let everybody know how it goes this weekend.
Good luck with that. Thank you very much.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing.